Hi everyone, it's Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video I'm going to show you how to make this super easy and simple square Frankenstein hat. I love this pattern because it's super easy. Most of it's stitched in double crochets, and I gave him a little bit of a scary face with those eyes. Now the hat, if you make it as written, will fit a youth to adult about 20 to 22 inches. Keep in mind it's very, very stretchy. I wanted to make the pattern super easy so you could whip it up and pop it on your head in just a couple hours. The free crochet pattern is on my blog, and you can find that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. To make your Frankenstein hat, you're going to need some yarn, and this pattern is written for worsted weight or medium weight number 4 yarn. You can use Red Heart Super Saver, you can use Karen 1-pounders, you can use I Love This yarn. Any yarn that you have on hand that is a medium number 4 weight yarn will work for this pattern. The original pattern here in green was done with I Love This yarn from Hobby Lobby, and the black is 1-pounder in black, and the white is Red Heart Super Saver. So as long as it's acrylic, I think it's fine for you to mix your yarns. Use up your leftovers. For the video demonstration today, I'm going to be making the main part of the hat in this lilac sort of lavender purple. I'm going to give it pink hair, and then I'll be using black and white for the eyes, the mouth, and the little scar. You're going to need about 3 ounces for the main part of the hat, and then an additional ounce for the black part, and then just a little bit of whatever you have on hand for the eyes and the eyebrows. We're going to be stitching today with our eye hook, and this eye hook is a 5.50 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need a needle for weaving in those ends and adding your details, and then of course you'll need to have a pair of scissors. We're going to be starting at the bottom of the hat and making the band first, and then working our way up and finishing up with his hair. We'll be starting with making 60 foundation double crochets. And I began with the foundation or chainless double crochets because I want the band of the hat to be stretchy. If you substitute by chaining and then adding your double crochets, your hat will not be stretchy at the band. Another thing to keep in mind is that 3 foundation double crochets equal about an inch. And so if you need to make your hat a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, you can adjust it by adding or subtracting 3 foundation double crochets per inch. For this pattern, I'm going to be stitching 60 foundation double crochets. We're going to begin with our slip knot, and then we're going to chain 4. Yarn over, go in the 4th chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, and only pull that through the 1st loop. Now we're going to yarn over, go through the next 2 loops, yarn over, and go through those last 2 loops. So we've created our chain and our double crochet. Our chain 3 here counts as our first double crochet. Yarn over, we're going to go in that first chain that we made when we did our very first pull over, or yarn over I should say, and we'll repeat that. Go just through the 1st loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. Yarn over, go in that 1st loop, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through the 1st loop, yarn over, go through the next 2, yarn over, and go through the last 2. This is our foundation double crochet. And if you're making the pattern the size that I'm making, which is the youth to adult, you'll need to do 60 foundation double crochets. And remember, your chain 3 counts as your first. So I have 4. Let's do a few more just to make sure you understand what I'm doing. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over and only go through the first loop. Yarn over and go through the next two, yarn over and go through the next two. So basically what we're doing is we're making our chain, which is this, and then we're stitching our double crochet. And again, I like to use this technique at the bottom of a hat band sometimes because it makes a nice stretchy band. Now I do want to give you one little hint. When you're making a long chain of single crochets or double crochets or just chains, foundation double crochet like we're doing here, you can mark those with your stitch markers. We're going to do 60, so I'll probably mark it every 20. That way I don't have to keep recounting. And so what I would do is if this is at my 20th stitch, I'll just put the stitch marker in. And then I can do my next 20 and I won't have to count those first 20 again. And it's a great way to keep us from losing count. Alright, so I'm just going to continue stitching my foundation double crochets until I have 60, which is what I need for my hat. I've completed stitching my 60 foundation double crochets. You can see I marked it with 2 stitch markers, marking at the 20 and the 40 stitch. We'll go ahead and move those out of the way. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our band is not twisted, and we're going to join to the chain 3 with a slip stitch and chain 3. Now you'll notice right here we have a little bit of a split. Don't worry about that right now. When we finish the hat, we're going to come back in and close that opening. For row 2, the chain 3 counts is our first double crochet, and we're going to stitch front post double crochet around the next stitch. Yarn over, and we're going to go around the post instead of in the top of the stitch where we usually stitch our double crochet. We're still going to stitch a double crochet, we're just putting it in a different place. And so the way row 2 is going to work is we'll stitch a double crochet in the next stitch and a front post double crochet in the next. And it's called a front post because you're stitching your double crochet around the post of the stitch, not the top. And we're alternating this, going all the way around. So here's our double crochet. We'll stitch that front post double crochet again, just so you can see. It's still a double crochet, we're just putting it in a different place. So we're going to alternate double crochet and front post double crochet. And this is what's going to give us our nice stretchy hat band. Double crochet in the top of the next stitch, double crochet around the post of the next stitch, alternating every other stitch. Double crochet, front post, double crochet. And see how that looks? It gives you that nice stretchy band for the bottom of our hat. So just to repeat, I will be stitching double crochet in the next stitch, front post double crochet in the next, working all the way around our hat band, and then we'll join back to our chain 3. I've completed this row of stitching double crochet, front post double crochet, working all the way around, and you're still going to have 60 stitches. You're going to have 30 front posts and 30 double crochets. I've joined to the top of my chain 3 and I'm going to chain 3. For row 3, we're going to be stitching 1 double crochet in each stitch around, and we're going to be stitching in the back loop. And so if you look on the row on the top of your stitches, you'll notice there are 2 loops. There's a loop on this side and a loop on this side. The loop that is facing you is a front loop. The loop on this side that's facing away is your back loop. And we're going to be stitching all of our double crochets on this row in our back loops. So yarn over, we'll go through that first back loop and stitch a double crochet. So again, we're stitching double crochets, we're just putting them in a different place. 1 double crochet in each double crochet, stitching in the back loops. And as you stitch your back loops, you'll notice that a little line of loops forms across here. That's exactly what it's supposed to look like. And if that's the way it looks, you're doing it right. So for row 3, we're stitching 1 double crochet in each double crochet around, stitching in the back loops only. And we'll only be doing that for this one row. We'll continue all the way around and join back to our chain 3. I've completed this row, stitching 1 double crochet in each double crochet, stitching in the back loop only. And you can see that line of the front loops that I didn't stitch in. Alright, so we're going to join to the chain 3 with a slip stitch and chain 3. Now, for row 4, all we're going to do is stitch 1 double crochet in each double crochet around. No front loops, no back loops, and no front posts. We'll just stitch 1 double crochet in each double crochet, working all the way around the hat, and then we'll join back to our chain 3. And then we're going to repeat this for 8 more rows. So up through row 12, we'll just stitch 1 double crochet in each double crochet around, join to the chain 3 with a slip stitch, and chain 3. So we'll repeat row 4 for 8 more rows. So I've repeated row 4 8 more times, so it brings me up to row 12, and you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows of just solid double crochets. That's one of the reasons this hat is super easy. We're going to be changing colors now, so I'm going to grab my scissors, clip my first color, and bring in my second. And this is the hair. And I'm going to be making the hair on this one in pink. So I'm going to bring it in. And chain 3. To make Frankenstein's hair, we're going to be alternating double crochets and spike stitches. Our chain 3 counts is our first double crochet. Then we're going to double crochet in the next stitch. We're going to stitch a spike stitch in the next stitch. And so instead of stitching up here where we usually stitch, we're going to stitch down here in the bottom of that double crochet. We'll stitch 1 double crochet in the next 2. And then we'll stitch the next stitch down in the bottom of the previous double crochet row. See? 2 double crochets because our chain 3 counts as our first, and a spike stitch. 2 double crochets and a spike stitch. And we'll repeat this all the way around our hat. 1 double crochet in the next 2, and then a spike stitch in the next. Now a spike stitch is just a stitch that goes down, and it can be a long spike stitch or a short spike stitch. It just depends on where the pattern is asking you to place it. And what we're doing for Frankenstein's hair is stitching 1 double crochet in the next 2, and then a spike stitch stitching in the bottom of that double crochet in the next. And again, we're still stitching double crochets. Our stitch count will remain the same at 60. We're just placing our double crochet in a different place again. We'll continue this all the way around our hat and then join back to our chain 3. I've completed that row, stitching 2 double crochets with a spike stitch, stitching in the bottom of that double crochet from the previous row, and repeat all the way around. I joined to my chain 3 and chain 3. All right, so now this is our last row on our hat, and all we're going to do is stitch 1 double crochet in each double crochet around. Got to give Frankenstein just a little bit more hair at the top of the hat so it stands up. Alrighty, so 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets around, and again we'll join back to our chain 3, and then we're going to join closed the top of the hat. I completed that last row of 1 double crochet in each double crochet across. I joined to my chain 3 and only chained 1, and that's because we're going to lay our hat flat and we're going to join the top together with slip stitches. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the first stitch on this side and the first stitch on this side, pull that through and slip stitch. We'll do this all the way across our hat. And this is going to give Frankenstein a nice flat hairdo. Looks like I got a string there. There we go. So we go through the next stitch on this side and the next stitch on this side, pull the loop through, then pull that loop through the loop on our hook. That's a slip stitch. There we go. Now, make sure you don't stitch it too tightly because you don't want it to pucker up. You want it to hold its shape of being a little bit of a square. Kind of give the illusion of Frankenstein's flat top. All right, so I'm going to continue this across, closing up the top of my hat, and then I'll tie off at the end of this row. And the next thing we need to do is make Frankenstein's creepy eyes. I've slip stitched all the way across the top of the hat. I cut my yarn and I'm going to tie that off. All right, we're going to take our needle and weave that into the inside of our hat. So I'm going to go inside, I'm going to push that needle in. And then we'll weave it in, going through a few stitches, fibers of the yarn, until we're happy that that's not going to come undone. Now before we make and add the eyes and the face, we have this small slit from where we started that we need to close up. So we're just going to thread that tail of yarn on our needle and sew it closed. And it's very important that you really sew this snugly because this is the hat band and you don't want it to come undone. Up and down and back and forth. All right. Now I have one more spot to weave in some ends, and then I'm going to show you how to make the eyes and finish our hat. This is the way that your eye is going to look. Because the black yarn is very difficult to see on video, I'm going to show you with the lavender and white instead of black and white. But of course, you can make your eyes any color that you want to. Make sure that you make two. All right, so I started with my slip knot. I'm going to chain 3. And again, this is the black pupil. And we're going to stitch right in the second chain 8 single crochets. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We'll join to that first single crochet with the slip stitch, and we're not going to cut our yarn. We're going to bring in the white and chain 3. We're going to stitch a double crochet in the same stitch as our chain 3, and then we'll stitch 2 double crochets in the next 4, here we go, stitches. And this is going to give us 10 double crochets. 2, 4, 6. This is 8. Whoops, there we go. And 10. 1 and 2. Now that's going to leave 3, 1, 2, 3 single crochets unworked because this is where we did our chain 3. All right. Now we're going to cut our white yarn, but you need to leave yourself about 10 or 12 inches because we're going to use that when we attach it to the hat. All right, so we're going to just lay that aside. We're going to bring back in our black, which we're using as purple right now. And we're going to bring that back in and snug that down. We're going to chain 4. And now we're going to form the eyebrow. We're going to slip stitch in the next stitch. 1, 2, 3 slip stitches because we slip stitched in the second chain from the hook. And now we're going to place 2 slip stitches in the side of this white stitch. 1 and 2. Then we're going to place a slip stitch in these 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to place 2 slip stitches in the side of this chain 3 that counts as our first double crochet. There we go. 1 and 2. Now we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. We're going to tie off again, but we're going to leave ourselves another long tail for sewing the eyebrow in place. So we'll go ahead and tie off. And this is the way your eye will look. Your pupil will be black, of course, unless you want to make it a different color. And then the white portion and the eyebrow. Now we do have a hole in the center, so we're going to turn this over. We'll grab our needle and we'll thread that onto our needle. And this is the short tail, not the long tail. The long tail will be used to sew the eyebrow on the hat. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to move that out of the way, and we're going to stitch around these stitches in a circle so we can gather up that eye closed. We don't want our pupil opened. Okay, and then we'll just weave that in. Cut that off, and then we'll take the short white tail and go ahead and weave that in as well, and that'll get that just out of our way. We won't have to worry about it anymore. So we'll just weave that in. There we go. We'll clip that off, and so now our eye is ready to be placed on our hat. Now on the green hat, I made the eyes sort of a slant so that they were a little bit angry. On our purple one, I'm going to make them just a little bit cute. And so I've already placed this one, and now I'm going to place this one. And they're just going to be flat. It's up to you how you want to place your eyes. All right, I'm going to thread on the white yarn and sew the eye first, and then I'll come back with the black and sew the eyebrow. All right, so I'm going to put my hand under here. I want to make sure it's lined up at the bottom with this one. And you can pin that if you want to with a pen or a needle to make it a little more easy for you to sew it on. I'm going to go up behind, and I'm just going to follow the edge of the eye around where these stitches are. And I'll make sure I'm lining everything up. And remember, you want to sew it on securely, but you don't want to sew it on so tightly that it doesn't stretch a little bit as it's being worn. And so what I do is I sort of kind of come up around, eyeball it, make sure the bottom of the white is similar. Bring my needle back here. All right, I want to make sure my white is lined up with the other one. And I'll stitch it around. Then when I get here, whoopsie, I'll rethread that, of course. All right, and then I'll just go back around the eye, right around that edge. That way, if I don't like where I've put it, I only have to take out the one row of stitches. Okay, so we're just going to go back around, stitching, making sure the eye is securely placed on the bottom. And then we'll just take that to the back and weave that in, because I like where the eye is placed. Alrighty, now I'm going to add the eyebrow, or sew on the eyebrow portion of the eye. Alrighty, so I want my eyebrows to touch, so I'm going to go right over here and stitch a stitch. There we go. Make sure they're going to touch. All right, now you'll notice the top of the eye kind of arches up, and I like to kind of push it down to make it straight. But you can arch it up if you want to. It's kind of up to you, again, how you want your eyes to look. Push it up a little there. And mine is sort of pushed up a little here, a little bit here. We're lining up on this line. Get in there. And then my needle must be a little bit blunt. All right. Then I'll just go back across, making sure everything's where I want it. There we go. And then we'll just go underneath and weave that in. All right. So we've got the eyes on. Now he needs a little nose. There's his grumpy eyes. All right, let's make Frankenstein's nose. We'll begin with a slip stitch and chain 3. And then we're going to place 10 single crochets in the second chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We're going to join to our first single crochet. We'll cut our yarn, giving ourselves about 12 inches, and tie off. Alrighty, now we may have a little bit of hole in the middle. We're going to close that up, and then we'll sew it on Frankenstein's face. So here's Frankenstein's nose. You can place it down low, up high. I like it about right there, centered in the middle. That gives me room to add a mouth, and then I'll put the scar over here. All right, so we're just going to stitch around it. And I like to kind of pooch it up a little so it looks a little bit three-dimensional. That way you can see his nose. Now you can make it a different color if you want to. And I'm just going to keep going around. That's what I'm doing here. But you can make your nose a different color. You could make it black or whatever. I just like doing it the same color as the face. All right, his nose is all attached. And now I'm going to go in and weave that in. All right. So the last thing we need to add is his smile and scar. All right, so let's cut off a piece of black yarn, 10 or 12 or more inches. We'll thread that onto our needle. And you can decide if you want a smile like this one, or you want a zigzag mouth. I think I'm going to put a zigzag mouth on this one just to give you another option. And so what I do is I start on one end and kind of see how far over I want to do it, and make sure when you stitch on any of your embroidery that you go through a stitch, not a hole. If you go through the holes in between, you'll lose your stitches in those holes. All right, so I'm going to just bring this up, leaving a little tail. I'm going to go through this stitch. And I'm just going to weave it back and forth, making that zigzag mouth that sometimes we see on our Frankenstein hats. The smile is really easy to make. if you prefer the smile. My intention wasn't really to make this hat scary, but more fun. I don't really like scary things. I'm more into the silly things. All right, let's see if that's wide enough. All right, I think I'll make one more stitch. There we go. So that it ends up at the top like that. And there's my zigzag mouth. And I'll just take a second here and weave that in because I don't want that coming out. So there's my zigzag mouth, and now I want to add just a little scar, and I think I'm going to put it on this side. You can do it however you want, all right? And so I'm just going to come up, and again, make sure you go through a stitch, not a hole, and I'm going to go at an angle, leave myself a little bit for weaving in back there, and I'm just going to stitch, going through a couple of stitches. Start with a straight line. Go have it end about right there. And then we'll form those stitches that go sideways. And again, try the best that you can to get it going through stitches and not holes. There we go. And of course, the amount of stitches that you add that looks like he's had surgery is up to you. And of course, the length of the stitches is up to you as well. All right, I'm running a little short of yarn, so I'm going to pull that through. Just like that, and there's my scar. I like it kind of wonky. All right, so I'm going to take a couple minutes and weave this one in as well. And then Frank's going to be all done. So here's our finished purple Frankenstein with cute eyes and a zigzag mouth, or you can make cranky eyes, a twisted smile. Either way, it's a super easy pattern that you can whip up really quick.